Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. I am blooming as a flower. I am fresh as the dew. I am solid as a mountain. I am firm as the earth. I am free, I am free, I am free. That is from activist, Zen master, teacher, and builder of beloved community, a cultural ancestor, a spiritual ancestor, and a person who Time magazine calls the father of mindfulness, Thầy Thich Nhat Hanh. Good morning, beautiful ones. You are my mirrors and my windows. What a gift. Thank you, Jasper. You inspire me. Thank you, EL Education community, for this opportunity. So, I've been in this principalship for 18 years. And at the beginning, or actually for quite a number of years, I went fast to go fast. Because I didn't want my lack of skillfulness, lack of experience, to be a detriment to my students, families, and staff. And so, like many of you right now, I've been asking the question, what will accelerate academic achievement and social emotional learning for my students? But I've learned through the pandemic and in principal version 4.0, because you got to upgrade for all the kinds of changes you got to lead, right? That isn't the right question at the moment. Instead, I'm guided by the question that our ILT came up with during the distance learning year. Remember that? The question is, how do we develop educational experiences that are affirming, liberatory, and transformational for academic and whole child excellence for all children under any learning conditions? So, to meet the achievement standards, typically, principals, we set data-driven goals, we use research-based strategies, and we execute in a way that aligns time, energy, and resources, right? Leaders in the room? Anybody leaders in the room? Principal leaders in the room? Okay, but all kinds of leaders. What we're supposed to do. And to answer this, though, I would say we need to move beyond the traditional understanding of resources. We must consider how we allocate our attention as a precious resource. This is where we move from achievement to helping young people own their excellence under any learning conditions. Achievement is set by an external bar. Even the SAT, ACTs is not even used as a requirement for entering top universities anymore. So the bar keeps changing. We've got to provide strategies, conditions, and resources that our young people will own no matter what and carry through time and space. Have you heard that attention is the new unit of wealth? Think about it. In the information age, not is only attention being monetized. They gain millions of dollars for data on where we're spending our time, right? Our attention, internet use. But we give it up too freely. And you know, where attention goes, energy flows. So, would you do an exercise with me? Just say yes. Okay. You know, I want an award, just do something. Okay. So, can you imagine for me what comes up? So ready? So, a first grader comes into your classroom or school, and you've learned about this child. Father went to prison for 3 years. His father was killed by violence. And family members were victims of violent crimes. Child wears donated clothes, family uses Section 8, food stamps. Their car would break down in the middle of the road. Child almost died as an infant. And members of the family were targeted at the police state. Child and family didn't follow around the store, thinking they're gonna steal something. And the child's missed 8 months of school. I know you see that list, but try to see what image comes up in your mind. How would you approach working with this child? Okay, there's more. So, what about this? The child's lived in a shelter with 4 other families, without bathroom, running water, or electricity. Child's been infected with tuberculosis, has had intestinal parasites, is an English language learner. Mom has had 8th grade education. Family's property, wealth, belongings, assets have been confiscated. Child has no photos or imagery of themselves. And family has refugee status. And all members of the family took on a different identity in order to escape their home country. What do these additional attributes, experiences, how does it shift or add to your image of the child? You see that first grader profiled was me. For 8 months, we lived on a Malaysian refugee island. I received no formal education, no Chromebooks, no work packets, no Zoom. In Vietnam, while we had a lack of material things, and when we came, we didn't know how to navigate the system, but there were a lot of strengths. So my mom in Vietnam was a successful businesswoman on an 8th grade education. Why did she have an 8th grade education? Been running around dodging bombs, hiding in shelters between the French imperialists who were wanting to, use Vietnam for another 100 years, and then the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong liberators who wanted to turn Vietnam into a communist state. So, by the way, the communists were called the National Liberation Front. Their practice of liberating was to persecute political dissent. And my dad was an activist here in this, when we came to the States. He was fighting for human rights because as a former political prisoner, he knew of the life and death reality within the jungle confines of what his captors called, wait for it, re-education camp. Anybody can call something something. It's what's in the practice. While my story is unique, it's not a story of exceptionalism. As I think of my own experience and the experience of my students, some key questions come up for me. As we attempt to be trauma-informed in our approach, how do we ensure that we don't become trauma-defined in our approach? I love some growth mindset. But when we pair growth mindset with trauma-informed lens, and we have the pandemic, there's a tendency to see just the trauma. When we think of growth mindset, we also have an assumption that you start from somewhere like you gotta grow to. That's all fine and good, but when we pair all that together, we get into a cycle. It's in our subconscious. What about we move to an abundance mindset? My profile, if I stayed in the trauma place, right, wouldn't have gotten me very far. I might have made it to the place where I got all the degrees and whatnot, but I, inside, would have replicated the system. How do you keep your agency, your sense of soul? We were robbed at sea during our escape. You thought I was done with the list, right? You were like, oh my goodness, it's so depressing. Yeah, there's more, folks. We were robbed at sea by pirates with machetes, bigger boats. They took our compass. They took everything. They took all the other things, but they took our compass and left us out floating to die. I get lost a lot, folks. I do. I got lost that first day of first grade. I get lost going up and down to my hotel room to this ballroom 3 times. Jeez. Okay, and when I was driving, I seriously, I used to be really upset with myself. Why you get lost? You know, late. And so I said, what's wrong with me? And so I realized that I have a lot of different forms of intelligences. It's nice where it's nice to be an educator. You get to use all that jargon to kind of convince yourself that you're okay. And then I could solve the problem with a GPS. Yeah, remember that? Now they call it Waze, Apple Maps, Google Maps, all that. Kids just call it the phone, right? The moment that I had the abundance mindset shift, I transformed my suffering and my struggle. There's a difference between knowledge, I'm late, I'm lost, what's wrong with me, to knowing. That is true power. And that is your inner compass. This takes us to the function of education in this moment, especially. We have people who are open to reconsideration. Schools should be designed to support young people in this way to cultivate power, from the inside out, and to create conditions where their suffering doesn't define them, and where their abundance can shine. Where they can be in their journey of excellence in the face of very real structural inequities. Let me say it, assaults, right? Equity is so passive. And we can provide the practice for them to support our children to develop their inner GPS. So speaking of practice and power, you know, in schools, we really don't teach about power in a way that is healing and affirming and life affirming, right? We teach about, well, actually, you know, you experience when power goes wrong. You know that. It doesn't feel good. And we know it comes up in, you know, history lessons, because the history of this country, a lot of ways that power has been misused. Between management practices and staff, that doesn't always feel good for some folks, right? And then when we talk, and it comes up in discipline issues, right? Power, kids feel it, but we don't teach it explicitly, and then we kind of shy away from it. What if we taught power explicitly from a place that is life-affirming as well? So, you know, children need to be in their power of stillness so that they can know from their heart and in their gut that they define their own truth, their own destiny, not defined by expertise, externally driven achievement model of knowledge. Let's expand our understanding of knowledge as different ways of knowing and different ways of mastery. EL does a lot of that, the way that you do craftsmanship. It's not perfection, it's progress over perfection, right? You've heard of mindfulness programs. Mindfulness is actually not a program, folks. It's a way of being present in every moment, to notice how the internal story is creating a mental formation. And in that moment, in that awareness of your story, to be open to new perceptions. And finally, it's to look deeply inside to gain insight and wisdom. We have students who come from all kinds of profiles, and none of those profiles adequately tell their story. We need to help them tell their story. We need to hear from them, their story, and their families. So we do it through storytelling. And if we can do it through the explicit teaching of life-affirming definitions of power. And if we do these things, just a few, they can update their story to meet the conditions of the moment. And therefore, a pirate a politician, laws, microaggressions, zip codes, pandemic of COVID, pandemic of racism, or any geopolitical boundaries can't take that away. I hope that in this short time, I can shift your attention a little bit below the surface. As our Student Family Connections Coordinator, Ms. Rico, said to me about family engagement, don't make assumptions about my limitations and my aspirations. In each of these moments that we are in our own power, we are home. Speaking as a refugee, right? Nation state, being homeless at some point, nationless at some point. So to do that, we have to walk differently in how we do schools. Imagine differently. I want to leave you with the example of how we can walk differently. Remind ourselves of the power of stillness and how we can be refreshed at any given time. Breathing in, do it with me. Breathing out, deep breath in. Breathing in, breathing out. I am water, reflecting what is real, what is true. And I feel there is space deep inside of me. Sing it with me. I am free. I am free. I am